Thank you, everyone. Welcome to the Kajiado We Want Awareness session. My name is Regina. We're glad to have you today, the 21st of December, 2022. And we are happy to be speaking to you once again and to be bringing some of the education sections that we have at the Kajiado We Want. But before we begin, I'm going to ask Alice to lead us in a word of prayer.
Mighty and everlasting Father, we glorify your holy name. We appreciate all that you've done in our lives, my Lord. We thank you for this opportunity once more to learn and also to hear from you through your servant. As we are going to start this session today, we dedicate it before your able hands, Lord. May your Holy Spirit guide us and also guide him, even as he takes us through today's topic. We welcome your presence to be with us, for without you, we can do nothing. And at the end of this session, we'll give you all the glory and all the honor. I thank you, mighty Father. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Now, as per our normal operations, first of all, we would like to introduce the Kajiado We Want, what we are all about, what we do, and who we are doing it with. I would like to welcome our chairman, Mr. David Dome, to take us through introduction of the Kajiado We Want, what it is, so that we can begin from that point. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody who is viewing this live stream from the Kajiado We Want community-based organization, which is basically about the development and progress of Kajiado County. We are not affiliated to political party. We are just a community entity, and we welcome everybody on board who is a resident in Kajiado County or somebody with interests in Kajiado County. You may be residing abroad or even outside this county, and you have interest in terms of property or even a relative. So that's what we do. And ours is a team of volunteers who have come together to work with everybody from government to non-governmental entities in order to achieve the development that we want. And the Kajiado We Want focuses on 8 key areas, and these are the infrastructure, environment, water and sanitation, education and literacy, security, job creation, trade and industry, advocacy for the vulnerable groups, and health, as well as education and literacy. And how do we intend to achieve our objectives? We intend to achieve our objectives through creating awareness. People need to understand their rights. People need to understand the process of getting development. People need to understand the roles of the various levels of government and various leaders. And also people need to know how they can take part in their own development and progress. So we create awareness through talks like this one every Wednesday at 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. And 2, through lobbying. Lobbying is huge. It is about ensuring people are going for public participation, which are provided for in the Constitution. We also do memorandum to our leaders on issues that I have talked about and what we would like to see developed. We intend also to petition where we could, where we feel that the leaders may work better through petitions, and finally even picketing where that is needed. The other way, as I said, is partnering with NGOs, entities, organizations that are interested in developing our Kajiado. So those are the areas we cover, and this is one of the ways we are reaching out to people to train them under our thematic area of education and literacy. And financial education is a key area that we need to go into. Back to you, moderator, for the way forward.
Thank you very much, David. We are in December and we are entering into the festivity season. And I know most of the time that is when globally people get to spend a lot of money on things that are actually required and things that are not really necessary. That's when we go far and beyond in our pockets to buy gifts for the people that we love and the people that we are basically forced to. And it is one of the seasons that people seem to spend a lot and in many instances incur into debt. So today's topic is personal debt management. We're going to learn on how we can ensure that even as we go into this season and even as we set goals and objectives for the coming year, we are aware of how our pockets are going to look like, how our bank accounts are going to look like, and how we can ensure that we proceed the rest of the year without having to go through a lot of difficulties, a lot of mental let me just call it mental instability in quotes, because we are confused as a result of getting into debts. And come January, that's when most people begin to borrow from one person to the other, and at the end of the day, we are encircled by debts. So today's topic is actually one of my favorite, and I hope that everyone is going to learn from it. I have my notebook ready. I hope everyone has their notebooks ready because it's a very important topic. Now, I am going to let our chairman introduce the speaker for today, and then the speaker would definitely tell us what he does and how he can help the people of Kajiado, not just for this presentation or this talk, but afterwards, how can he ensure that he helps the Kajiado people in making sure that they are financially stable and they are not in debt. Welcome, David, and please introduce our guest speaker for today.
Thank you very much, and most welcome once again. Dear audience, Mr. Roy S. Okonji is a financial coach. I think I've known him for quite some time. And when he accepted to be on this talk, we were very happy because he's a big name out there. And what he does is more of a calling, almost a calling, because Roy used to work in a bank, and he just left that institution and decided to do what he does, which he enjoys, and he has been able to thrive. His life agenda is to inspire progressive change in society. To inspire progressive change in society. A few years ago, I think 8 years ago, when he came and told me what he was doing, I think that time people had just started getting into debt traps and all that, but it was not as much as it is today. We know today things are really, really, really bad. And I think what he does is very more relevant even today more than those 10 or 8 years ago. His promise is that you can do better. You can do better. I'll introduce him briefly in terms of what he has done, but it is not easy to introduce Roy in a sitting like this because of time. Probably you need to read his 7 books to get and understand him much more. So Roy is an outstanding debt and money management coach. He's a life coach, corporate trainer, and author. He strongly believes that everyone was created in a unique and great way, with unique great potential in order to achieve unique greatness. Roy practically consults and teaches on debt and financial literacy needs for individuals, family, and businesses with a view of helping them improve their relationship with debt and money in general. He conducts debt clinic sessions where he coaches one-on-one on debt and money management matters. He also runs several life skills training programs. He teaches life skills on both lecture and experiential forms like team building, that are aimed at helping individuals, families, and businesses to tap into and maximize their potential. His motivational talks and teachings are thought-provoking, intentional, and practical to help reveal a better you to the world, because all of us can get better than we are. He writes and publishes periodic inspirational articles. He's also authored 7 titles this year's Relate Well, Live Well, Confronting Fear, You Can Do Better, Debt is Good If Only You Master It, and Breaking Free from the Trap of Debt, as well as Managing My Money, and finally, Staying Financially Afloat. Those are 7 extraordinary titles that he has written. He's a regular panelist on various TVs and radios. I've been listening to him on TVs as well. And he discusses financial, personal, family, and business development concerns. He's a founder and director of Focus Universal, which is a financial management and life skills training. Roy is a consultant and a very great person to have tonight. Sit back, take your notebook, listen, and at the end of the day, also take his number, because he can take you on a journey of one-on-one on how you can come out of debt and become a greater person. Back to you, moderator.
Thank you very much. Roy, I think that's the best introduction that our chairman has done. We're looking forward to hearing from you how we can live a debt-free life and all that. So please welcome and take us through. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Sometimes when they read all those words, I am left wondering whether they're still describing me. I don't know. I'm not even sure how I look on the screen because of lack of control of circumstances here. But I want to believe that this voice will get to us and the presentation, and that is what is most important for now. So I'm so glad to be hosted by you tonight. And I want to start by congratulating the Kajiado We Want fraternity for having come up with this wonderful thought. I have gone through what you have done in the past, and you guys are just awesome. The things you have thought about and the conversations you've had can only take not just Kajiado, but the entire nation to another level. So I want to encourage you to just keep doing what you're doing, because it is a great thing. Those are conversations that are missing in society. Those are conversations that that we want to hear. So keep up what you're doing, and you guys are just destined for great things. Much has been said. I know time has also gone, and I just want to try and utilize the little time left just to be able to set this conversation rolling. What I have come largely to do is to ignite some deliberate thinking in each one of us around this conversation of debt. It is a huge conversation. We can talk about debt for a very long time. With all humility, I've been able to come up with areas of focus in the world of debt that can take us for a very long time. But today we are here to reflect on personal debt management. And when I was thinking about what kind of conversation we needed to have for tonight, I remembered that the first time you guys reached out, you were categorical that you'd love that I share something on personal debt management. And allow me to begin by saying that this one on its own is also a huge conversation. To do some fairness to it, we would require a little more time, because it has 2 parts. Okay, and I'll be alluding to the 2 parts in a short while, but God willing, we will come for us to be able to tackle the second part. But I'm here to just help us appreciate the essence of debt and debt management, as an integral part of personal financial management. Many times when we talk about personal financial management, many people want to ignore the portion of debt, yet it's a very crucial portion. Secondly, I also hope by the end of this, I'll have helped us to understand a little bit more on the trap of debt, its effects on personal wellness, and how entirely the trap of debt looks like. And then lastly, I hope to help us understand the practical process of preventive debt management while drawing a line between purpose-driven and ability-driven borrowing. So those three objectives should be able to lead us this evening in the few minutes that we have. So usually when I have a conversation like this, I often ask my audience whether they think debt is good or debt is bad. If we had the opportunity and time, I would have loved to ask you this question, but I think you can also answer yourself what you think, whether you think debt is good or debt is bad. But I'll tell you what I have collected from very many sessions, including a session I had yesterday with a certain group of people. And my observation is that different people view debt differently. So in every instance where I have asked people whether they think debt is good or bad, I have received a good number of people saying that they think debt is a bad thing. I have also seen a good number of people say that debt is a very good thing. And then I have seen people who are in the middle who don't know whether it's good or bad. But I begin by telling us that debt is neither good nor bad absolutely. Debt is like a loaded gun. The direction you point it determines how powerful or finished you become. If you point it towards yourself, you are so finished. But if you point it in the direction of opportunities, then you become powerful, right? So we do not have power to absolutely declare debt as either good or bad. So it depends with your conduct around debt before you borrow, during the process of borrowing, and also after you have borrowed, after you have received the money. So your behavior around borrowing in those three instances will determine whether your debt will be a good one or your debt will be a bad one. The conversation we're having tonight is so close to my heart, is one of my pet subjects, actually pet subject number one, simply because of the experiences I've had in the world of borrowing. I have a huge story that I know some of you might have had. Apart from the fact that my experience in the bank, all the years I was there, was largely centered around the departments of credit, I have also had a personal encounter with this conversation. And much in terms of financial recklessness, because I've been a wreck in the past. I have done very many financial mistakes. I have borrowed myself silly. I have found myself in corners that you would not wish your enemy to be, simply because I didn't know how to relate with money. And I was just going through financial decisions haphazardly, just the way my mind would direct me. That is how I would go about my financial decisions, and that led me to burning my fingers in a very big way. I have lived in the trap of debt for a very long time. And for the avoidance of doubt, some of you have heard me mention that I am the only award-winning borrower this side of the universe, because I hold a very expensive trophy that was given to me by one of my Shylocks for being the most trustworthy borrower and for continued business. I know many of you have an understanding of how Shylocks operate, so I leave it to you to imagine who is this Shylock in their right state of mind who can sit down to think of using business money to award a borrower. And it's a very expensive trophy that they gave me, but it's a trophy that I cherish so much because it opened my eyes. I was supposed to be happy that I've been rewarded for being the most trustworthy borrower. But that was the day I found myself asking critical questions. You mean I'm being rewarded not for any other thing, but for for borrowing, not even from the mainstream lenders, but from that other market, the very expensive market. And so that trophy is what opened my eyes. I placed it on my desk at the office, and I told myself that may this trophy be a reminder every morning as I sit here, may it remind me of the journey ahead of me. Okay, I've also shared in the public space that when I received that trophy, when I was starting to work on my story, I was owing a multitude, right? Not just many lenders, a multitude. I was owing not one, not two, not 10, not 20, not 30, not 40, not 50. And this is not fiction, this is true story. I was owing a record 86 lenders. And so when you find me very passionate about this conversation, it is because I understand in fine details how the corners of the also had the opportunity to have a taste of the positive side of debt. While at the bank, I've had the opportunity to also be a relationship person for SMEs. And so I've also journeyed with business people. And I've seen small businesses balloon into big ones because of proper utilization of borrowed funds. But I've also witnessed huge ones collapse because of mistakes that are related to mismanagement of borrowed funds. Okay. I've also been a debt collector, so I have also visited families, and that is when I saw the impact of the trap of debt on the family unit. And I can tell you that that thing has dire consequences on the family unit. All right. Some of you have also encountered me in your churches, trying to reach out to the family unit through something I do for couples that I call enhancing financial intimacy in marriage, just to help people improve their relationships with money as individuals, as families, as businesses, as we try to better ourselves. All right, so when we talk about debt management, which is what has brought us here, I needed to give us that background just for the sake of someone who might be thinking that I have come so that we may just have some other theoretical conversation. I always like starting by giving a disclaimer that in the course of my conversation, I will pinch you, not once, not twice, because I'm here to speak reality. And so when you feel pinched, please don't take it personal, take it as a wake-up call. Okay? Because sometimes some wounds require to be thoroughly cleaned before some treatment begins to happen to them. And so when process through which debtors seek to regain control of their debt situation, that is a conventional view of debt management. A view that I disagreed with partly because that view presumes that one has to borrow, begin to struggle for them to start debt management. Okay. In my considered opinion, debt management begins at the time you conceive the idea to borrow. Right? At the time you conceive the idea to borrow, that is when you begin your debt management journey. If you get it right in your decision making around borrowing, you will have lessened the chances of struggling with debt in the days to come. Okay, and so I altered that definition a bit, and I said that debt management is the process through which debtors gain or regain control of their debt situation. Three words are important there. The first word is process. And so debt management is a process. It's not an event. It is not something you will do once and say you're through with debt management. As long as you have a relationship with debt, as long as you're still repaying your debt, you are still managing debt. All right. So it's a process. The second word is the word gain. And that word is to mean that you start getting control from the beginning. And then the third word is regain. Regain is where you borrowed and you have burned your fingers. And so you are fighting to come back to normalcy. Okay. And that is how I came up with two kinds of debt management. There is what I call the preventive debt management, which I'll focus on tonight. And then there is what I call the curative debt management. The preventive debt management is debt management for someone who wants to get into debt, someone who wants to utilize debt to their advantage. And so I'm trying to highlight to us some of the proper ways of approaching debt so that it does not burn our fingers. Then curative debt management, which is the second part, like I had said, this conversation usually has two parts, is a part dedicated for people who might be where I was. They have already borrowed, they have burnt their fingers, they are wondering how to go about it. And so that part is for those who are seeking to break free from the trap of debt. So already from that demarcation, you begin to see that that calls for us to have quite a lot of time. And that's why I said, God willing, in the days to come, we might then need to convene again and reflect on the second bit, the curative debt management. But for the minutes we have, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to very quickly walk us through preventive debt management. But before we get there, I like asking, why is debt management necessary? Why is it important that you and I needed to gather here tonight for us to reflect on debt management? Is it really an important thing? And I will tell you straight that it is an important thing. And there are many reasons why people might need to learn about debt management, but I usually summarize them into one, that we learn debt management for us to be able to avoid getting trapped in debt. Like I said in the beginning, debt is neither good nor bad absolutely, okay? But this thing I'm calling the trap of debt is absolutely bad. If anyone is listening to me and they have struggled with debt, they know what I'm talking about. The trap of debt has got nothing interesting in it, okay? And so the real monster, the real enemy that everyone needs to battle or everyone needs to avoid is the trap of debt, not debt, the trap of debt, because you can utilize debt to better yourself. If you get engaged into debt, that will be good, like I mentioned in the beginning. But if you're not careful, you could also utilize debt to sabotage your chances of financial success. So when I talk about the trap of debt, some people think I'm describing something that is unique to a certain group of people very far away from the planet Earth. But let me tell you that debt management is universal. So you've been owing money, could be institutions, individuals, and you've been repaying well. Suddenly, a time has come when you need to repay, and you find yourself wondering, should I pay now or next week? Okay, if you found yourself in that situation, the trap of debt might be knocking. Or you find yourself wondering, sijui nilipe yote ama nilipe nusu? Okay, sometimes we get to those points. And if you do nothing about it, it degenerates into a very difficult cycle, a vicious cycle, where you find yourself borrowing from A to pay B so that you can borrow again to pay C, so that you can borrow again, and so on and so forth, depending on how long your chain is, so that you can borrow to survive. If your chain is as long as mine was, then you will need to really, borrow from A to B to C to Z and come back to A before you start borrowing to survive. By the time I was starting to work on my story, I had reached a point where the interest that my Shylocks needed, because there were many, the interests that they needed, interest alone was more than double my net pay. So I had gotten to a place where I was not enjoying my work because I am working for other people. When payday comes, I use all my net pay to pay interest. And then I have to borrow some more to complete payment of interest. And then I have to borrow now to survive. Yes, that is where I was. And so that trap of debt is what becomes your enemy, because that thing is what begins to turn your life upside down. Let me just try to paint for you a brief picture why I regard the trap enemy number one. In some other conversation that I call work-life choices, what you people call work-life balance. When I train about work-life balance, I like calling it work-life choices because it is a choice you have to make to strike a balance between your work life and your other bits of life. So I usually divide life into four parts. and that is your health, your relationships, your career, and your finances. Now, when you are trapped in debt, uh, each of these four parts of your life will be turned upside down. They will be affected. That is why this thing is dangerous. It can turn you into a shell of a human being. Now, here is one thing about the trap of debt. It does not care who you are in society. It does not care how much you earn. It doesn't care. With all humility, I've been running what the chairman read to you as the debt clinic for 5 years now. And it has been a humbling experience. That is the arrangement where I get to sit one-on-one with people who feel that they've been pushed to a corner and they would want someone to listen to them, encourage them, and help them on their journey of breaking free from the trap of debt. Now, that arrangement has exposed me to some realities of money that I never imagined. I've been able to sit down with people, serious people in this society. When they are booking for a session, sometimes I am left wondering whether they are surely coming for a session or they're just coming to test what I'm doing. But when we get to sit down, then I realize that the world is not what it seems out here. There are very many people out here. We pray that we were half what they are. But if only we knew what they are currently going through, then we would not even pray to be anything close to what they are. All right. There are many people who, in a bid to look like what society expects them to look like, they have to borrow themselves silly. They have exhausted their limits. I have sat with people who have downloaded all borrowing apps on their phones. They have borrowed, including limits as low as 500 shillings. But these are very senior people in society, both locally and internationally. And that has taught me that if you don't master how to relate with your money properly, it doesn't matter who you are and how much you earn, you will face the consequences of irresponsible financial behavior. Right? So when we talk about your health, the trap of debt will turn your health upside down. Uh, you see, there are very many divisions of health. There is physical health, emotional health, mental health, spiritual health. All those bits will be turned upside down when you're trapped in debt. When you're trapped in debt, your physical health is in jeopardy. You cannot feed properly. I like saying you will attend many seminars on nutrition, you will write very interesting notes, but when you get back home, reality dawns that it is not about the good notes that you wrote. It is about what your pocket can afford. And that affects your health. Many people, when they're trapped in debt, they're going through stressful moments, and therefore emotionally they're also affected. Mentally, they get to seriously be affected. The other day, I was sharing with some psychiatrists, and they were telling me that recently, many of the cases they handle can be traced to financial struggle, can be traced to the trap of debt. So you can imagine, your health is affected. Look at your relationships. When you're trapped in debt, your relationships will be affected. You will no longer be able to relate the way you would had you not gotten yourself trapped in debt. There are very many people, and I know you know some. Probably you are listening to me and you've been affected in this way. I know many friends who used to be closer than close, but today they don't see eye to eye simply because one lent money to the other and the other was not able to repay because of their struggles with debt. All right. Very many groups have collapsed because the officials, one or more officials, were trapped in debt and therefore they were tempted to mismanage the group's funds, and before they know it, the group is struggling. I have been invited to very many groups when they're actually collapsing simply because some members are not able to repay the monies they borrowed from the group. They had some table banking arrangements and now they can no longer survive because money has gone out and is no longer able to come back because people are struggling with the trap of debt. Marriage, which is the epitome of relationships, has suffered in a big way. A big way. I have sat with very many couples. I have taken very many couples away on retreat. And when we are doing some revelatory activities, it turns out that what is ailing many of these people is actually their struggle with money, all right? And so your relationship will not be spared. Your career will also not be spared. Okay, when you're trapped in debt, you can't go back to school. You are worse than a broke person. So if your growth at your workplace requires you to go back to school to up your skills, you don't have the money to go back to school. Okay, if you're trapped in debt and you're handling petty cash, many people have been tempted to steal, to utilize petty cash to repay their debt, to reduce pressure, in the hope that a miracle will happen before the company asks for the petty cash, that they'll be able to refund it. And then they are caught up before they are able to refund the money. And that's how they get to lose their jobs. Okay, so when you're trapped in debt, it eats into your career in a very big way. One day I took a company for team building, and at the end of the outdoor activities, I usually give an indoor brief talk as an addition to, to just crown the day. And I remember when we went for the indoor conversation, someone requested that I speak about, I say a few words about the trap of debt. And that person said in front of everyone that the reason why we don't have good relationships in the office is because the boss has borrowed from me and has refused to repay. And I want to believe he has also borrowed from other people here. Then a second person also rose and said, yes, the boss has actually borrowed from me and has defaulted for a long time. And then a third person and a fourth person. It became an embarrassing thing. I found myself in a very awkward position, okay, because all these things were happening on the floor when everyone was there. But it emerged clearly that the boss was struggling financially, and that is how the boss had ended up borrowing from other members of staff and defaulting while at it. The trap of debt will not fear your position. When I was wallowing in that struggle, I was borrowing even from the security guard, and I would default while at it. And I have had confessions of people who would even borrow from their tea girls and default while at it. So you need to be careful because this thing can bring shame to you, okay? And then lastly, your finances will also be messed up. You will be attending trainings and people will teach you the importance of savings and investment, but you'll be wondering, do people still save and invest in this day and age? You see, the gospel of savings and investment will not die soon. But the reason why you're wondering is because your finances cannot allow you to partake of that gospel, okay? Because of the trap of debt. When you're trapped in debt, your salary account or your income account, even if you are in business, becomes porous. It loses its money holding capacity, okay? Ni kama imetobolewa mashimo, and that's a dangerous thing. When you're trapped in debt, your salary account, your income account becomes what I call a conveyor belt. Okay, it becomes a transit account where money only comes to report that I also passed through here. Okay, as it goes to the hands that are waiting for it. And that's a dangerous thing. Okay, so you can begin to see that if you get yourself trapped in debt, all the crucial areas of your life will get turned upside down. And that is why we must learn how to avoid getting trapped in debt, and if we are already there, how to break free from the trap of debt. All right, so that was just in a nutshell to help us understand the magnitude of the effects of getting trapped in debt. So now we can begin to briefly talk about how to avoid getting trapped in debt, and that is preventive debt management. So when I talk about preventive debt management, I am trying um, to encourage us that when we think about debt management, that we need to start getting it right from the beginning. Okay, from the time when we conceive the idea of borrowing, from the moment an idea comes to your mind that you have an opportunity to use debt, is it possible that then you can behave in a certain good way so that that debt leaves you better off than it found you, so that you avoid making blunders of borrowing, okay? Because at that stage, if you blunder, then you will find yourself trapped in debt. So I came up with three sets of blunders, three sets of blunders. The first set of blunders are blunders that I call blunders before borrowing. You have not approached the bank or the lender yet. You are still at home. You have gotten the idea to utilize debt. There are some blunders you can make at that stage that will also cost you and give you a ticket to the trap of debt. Then I have blunders that I call blunders during borrowing. So you have decided to go ahead and borrow. As you approach your lenders, there are some mistakes you can make that will also get you trapped in debt. And then lastly, we have blunders after borrowing. After the money has been disbursed to you, there are some blunders you can still make that will lead you into trouble. Okay, so let's briefly talk about these three sets of blunders. So blunders before borrowing, before you get to approach a lender, there's some mistakes you can make at the stage when you have just conceived the idea. And it's good to highlight some of these mistakes so that you can avoid them for those of us that will be planning to utilize debt in the days to come. The first blunder is failure to qualify your purpose of borrowing. Okay, I also teach something else that I call purpose-driven borrowing. Now, many borrowers are what I call ability-driven borrowers. They borrow simply because they qualify or because there is a willing lender. That's why I call them ability-driven borrowers. How do you get to know them? When they walk into a lender's office, let's say a bank, the first thing they do, if they're employed and they have a payslip, they throw the payslip at the banker and they tell the banker, check for me how much I qualify for. And the banker will do calculations and the banker will tell you, you qualify for 100,000, and you will hear them say, nipatie form. The banker tells them 200,000, nipatie form. 1,000,000 shillings, nipatie form. And I keep asking them, what took you to the lender? Right? So when you do ability-driven borrowing, you'll be borrowing any amount that you qualify. You don't have a reason that pushed you into borrowing, a genuine reason. Okay? So that is ability-driven borrowing. You borrow simply because there is a willing lender, there's a lender telling you you have ability, or because you qualify. So just because you've been told you can qualify for this amount, ability-driven borrowers will find themselves completing forms to take the money. And unfortunately, that is the bulk of the borrowing mass, those who borrow just because they qualify. But now I usually invite people to this other side that I call purpose-driven borrowing, where you borrow dictated and directed by your reason for borrowing. Okay, so failure to qualify your reason for borrowing will burn your fingers. What do I mean by qualifying your reason for borrowing? Before you take up a loan, you have to ask yourself some questions at that stage when it's still an idea. For example, you need to ask yourself, must I borrow? For this reason, must I borrow? Some reasons actually might be hilarious for you to borrow for. Okay, some reasons are not urgent for you to borrow for. Okay, so you have to ask yourself, must I borrow? For this reason, must I borrow? For this reason, must I borrow? You have to ask yourself, for example, do I have other alternatives to other than going for a debt? Because debt is not free money. We must always remember, debt comes at a cost. Okay, it's unfortunate that ability-driven borrowers tend to forget that debt is actually coming at a cost, right? Ask yourself, for example, can it wait? Okay, whatever it is that is pushing me to borrowing, is it something that can wait until I have my money? For example, you want to upgrade your phone. The current one is still working, but suddenly you have an urge to upgrade your phone, and but you don't have the money. So you find yourself going to borrow for this phone. Yet, at the time you're borrowing for this phone, maybe in your company, you will have some bonus payouts in a couple of months. Can you wait and utilize bonus money to buy the phone at zero cost? Okay, so you ask yourself, can this reason wait until I have my money? You also ask yourself something interesting that I came up with. Ask yourself, who am I borrowing for? Now, when I say who you are borrowing for, I don't mean who you will give money after you've been given the loan. Okay, I know some people borrow and give the money to other people. That's quite literal. It happens. And many people have burnt their fingers because of that. But I'm going a bit deeper and I'm asking, where did you get the inspiration to want to borrow? I have argued that If you are borrowing so that you can compare yourself with me or compete with me, then you are borrowing for me and not for yourself. Let me show you how it works. If we work together in the same office and you see me with a good phone, and suddenly you develop the urge to also compare yourself with me, and you also want to buy the same phone or a better phone. In that case, you're competing with me. And then you don't have money, so you choose to borrow. So if you borrow today and you go and buy a similar phone to mine, and tomorrow you want to come to the office and show me that you also bought the same phone. Now, just before you remove the phone tomorrow to show me, if I remove a better phone from my pocket, you get disappointed. Okay? So that means you are not borrowing for yourself, you are borrowing for me. Now, for you to be able to do more and go far with debt, you must learn to borrow for yourself. There are very many people who will visit their friends, find their friends living in their own houses, and the next day they are queuing for a mortgage, so that when the friend will visit them back, they will find them also in their own houses. So these guys are not borrowing for themselves. They had not planned to take up a mortgage. They are being fueled by the urge to compare and compete. So you must ask yourself, who am I borrowing for? I don't mean you should stop getting inspired by other people, but when you get inspired by others, learn to customize the inspiration to suit your financial and life realities. Right? I hope we are making sense so far. The second blunder here in that set of blunders before borrowing, is failure to consider the impact of the proposed borrowing. And this one, very few people do. Many people make the blunder, so very few people get it right. Now, before you borrow money, you're supposed to ask yourself, the money I will use to repay, the deductions, for example, if it's 10,000 per month, you must ask yourself, what was this money doing in my budget? We forget that question. What was it doing in my budget? After they deduct this money, how will I be able to survive? For very many of us, we will borrow just because the lender told us that we qualify. And I also tell people that just because a lender has told you that you qualify doesn't mean that you truly qualify. True ability for borrowing is with you. You will know whether you qualify or you don't qualify. Sometimes our payslip might tell lenders that we qualify, but we know, okay, that after the money has hit our account, it's also deducted off payslip to, to repay other debts. So we know that even though this lender is saying we qualify, the truth is we actually don't qualify. Okay, so you must ask yourself what the impact of the borrowing will be after deductions have started. Many of us get shocked. Deductions have started, that's when we remember we forgot that that money was part of our rent money, that money was part of our school fees money. And that's when we are forced to start borrowing from expensive and dangerous sources. And that's a difficult thing to find yourself in. Now, the second set of blunders are blunders during borrowing. So you've gone through your purpose, you have approved, it's a good reason for borrowing, so let me go ahead and borrow. There are some blunders you can make at that stage that will also cost you and give you a ticket to the trap of debt. For example, when you fail to consider the cost of borrowing, we have said that debt comes at a cost. So when you disregard the cost of borrowing, you are setting yourself for burning your fingers. Because if you borrow expensively, you will be throwing away money. I like saying cheap is expensive, except debt. Debt is the only thing I will give you license to go for the cheapest. Under the same terms and conditions, there is no justification whatsoever why you should borrow money from a lender giving you at 30% when there is another lender under the same terms and conditions giving you the same debt at 15% or 14%, 13%. It doesn't make sense. So if you fail to consider cost of borrowing, you are setting yourself for trouble. In this town of Nairobi, because I do a lot of studies about debt here, there are Shylocks who are giving out money at 100% per week. Yes, I don't want to annualize that rate. I leave it to you to think about it. But those places are full of people, you and I, simply because at that point, our eyes are only focused on the money we want. We are forgetting that if this guy gives you 10 Gs on Monday, next Monday you are repaying 20. You must think about cost of borrowing. You see, CBK even made it easier. They introduced what is called the total cost of credit as part of the loan application process. So as you are signing and completing your loan forms, formal lenders will give you a TCC form to also show you a breakdown that this is what it will cost you entirely if you are to borrow this amount. But do we even get to see? We don't. Many of us just want to be shown where to sign. And that's why lenders will be giving us the forms with excess marked, because our focus is only on the money. We must remember to think about the cost of borrowing. If you fail to think about the terms of repayment, you will find yourself in trouble. Someone is giving you a loan and they're telling you that my money must be repaid next week on Tuesday. But you're a salaried person. You know the next money you will get is after 30 days. But you are agreeing to these terms. You know very well next week Tuesday you'll be a defaulter and not just a borrower. Okay, so we must think about repayment terms of the debts that we are finding ourselves in. If you fail to think about the turnaround time, how long will it take from the time you apply to the time money hits your account? If you fail to think about that, you might also find yourself in trouble. Now, some people think every debt is good for them. Let me make it clear. Not every debt is good for you. Not every debt is good for your reason. Money is not just money. Debt money is never the same. Income money might be the same. We might say money from a charcoal seller is the same money from a banker, is the same money from an investor elsewhere, but debt money is never the same. Okay? So you must learn how to match your reason for borrowing and the nature of the reason, or rather, and the type of debt that you need. So the nature of your reason and the type of debt. If you are in an emergency situation, it will be hilarious that you have a sick person. The doctor has asked for a deposit before they start treating your sick person. And I see you at the bank carrying a payslip to apply for a payslip loan that will come after a week. Or a title deed applying for a secured facility that will be ready after perfection of securities, which might take a month or two. It is hilarious because your sick person may not wait for 2 months for you to bring a deposit after that kind of borrowing. Or you don't have unga for your family and you want to borrow. And short-term debt came to sort emergency situations. It is hilarious that you don't have unga for this evening and you queue in the bank with your payslip to look for a loan that will mature after 1 week. I wonder whether your family will still be waiting for 1 week for unga to come for them to eat. So you must learn to match your reason for borrowing and the type of debt that resonates with that kind of reason. So you must think about how long it will take for the money to be ready vis-a-vis the kind of need that you have at hand. If you also fail to think about your repayment ability, you are setting yourself for trouble. The lender tells you that you can only qualify for 50,000, but you are insisting and lying to the lender that you see, I also have a side business. I know if you give me 100, I'll be able to repay. Many times you will struggle with that debt. The last set of blunders, ladies and gentlemen, is what I called blunders after borrowing. So you have borrowed, money has been disbursed to you. There are some mistakes you can still make that will cost you. Okay, and one of those mistakes is diversion of borrowed funds. This one is a big one. You borrowed for a specific purpose. That purpose dictated how much you needed to borrow. So you went and borrowed, but when the money landed in your hands, you remembered that your car had not been serviced. You remembered that you had never gone to Mombasa for holiday. So you slice part of the money or the entire money and you divert it to something else. You are creating what I call a future man-made emergency. This thing is very crucial for business people. Okay. I've done a video on my YouTube about the dangers of diverting borrowed funds for both salaried people and business people. But for business people, it is very crucial because for a lender to give you a loan as a business person, they have analyzed the current business. They have projected that if you utilize this money as proposed, then your revenue will grow this much, and therefore you'll be able to repay our loan and remain with some money this way, and your business will therefore scale. When you divert part or all the money given, you will not be able to grow your business as anticipated. That means you will start strangling your business of cash flow to repay the debt, as it were. Okay, so that is how it gets dangerous for business people and even individuals. I have shared many times. I like teaching using examples, and there is a time while still banking, I remember we gave someone a loan of 450,000. He had borrowed money for school fees, and when the money was given, I remember asking him who he was going to pay for first. He had four children in institutions of higher learning, but he told me that the money was his. I should mind my own business. So what he did is that he crossed the road after the bank, and he lodged in the lodging overlooking the bank, invited all his friends to come and witness how powerful he had suddenly become. And he chafued the measures in those places. The following day, he came back to me and he told me that he had just lost, he lost 100,000 shillings that he had withdrawn the previous day. That he entertained his friends. When he got drunk, they pickpocketed him the balance. So 100,000 gone. After giving me the story, he goes to the counter and picks another 100,000. Long story short, on the third day, he has not gone home. The wife is wondering where this guy is. So she learns that the guy is lodging in town. So she goes to the chief. On the fourth day, the chief writes a letter to the hotel and gives a few askaris. They raid the hotel. So on the fourth day, they bring the guy to the bank because the money was for school fees. They were only able to salvage 75,000 bob. Your guess is as good as mine whether the children continued schooling or not. Diversion of borrowed funds is disaster in waiting. The second blunder here that you can also do is to neglect to repay your debt. Okay, if you neglect to repay your debt, then you're also setting yourself for trouble. Neglecting means you are able, but you don't want to pay. Now, these days, with the advent of CRB and negative listing, it will affect you in future. A day will come when you want to utilize credit and you are not able. All right. I'm aware that the president has suggested that we have amendments here so that we purely do what CRB was meant to do, which is risk-based, to help in risk-based lending, but we are not yet there. Most of our lenders have been using CRB as a stopper. All right, so you're blacklisted, that's it. Go sort your issues before you can come. So you can imagine you are able to repay, but you refuse to pay. And then in future, you now need the money badly, and you go for the money, but you cannot be able to access the money because of a previous case. Okay, so the process of borrowing does not end after you have received money. The process of borrowing ends after you have repaid the last coin. We must get that. Okay, so do not neglect to repay your loans. If you are able to pay, we have two kinds of borrowers. We have the borrowers we call the can't pay borrowers and the won't pay borrowers. The can't pay borrowers, they have a willing heart to repay, but their circumstances may not allow them. And when we'll be doing part 2, God willing, maybe somewhere early next year, we will now see what can this kind of person do as they wait for money to happen. But then we have the won't pay customer. They are able, okay, but they have just refused to pay up their debts. So please don't be a won't pay. You borrowed money, dawa ya deni ni kulipa. So look for money and pay your debts. Okay. So that is, in a nutshell, what I call preventive debt management. I've just tried to, rush through it, just to give us a glimpse of how the preventive aspect of debt management looks like. So that if you choose to borrow, then you will do what I'm calling purpose-driven borrowing. Okay? In the process of purpose-driven borrowing, It's usually a process that I have given 7 steps. Okay, 7 steps. Allow me to just mention as I finish the 7 steps of purpose-driven borrowing. The first step is purpose qualification. What I talked about. You're asking yourself, must I borrow? Can it wait? Is it a good reason for borrowing? Number 2 is purpose quantification. How much money does this purpose need? Then number 3 is purpose classification. Is it an emergency? Is it something that can wait? Is it something that I'll be executing over a long span of time? So you classify your reason. Is it a reason that can wait, or is it an urgent reason? Number 4 is purpose mapping. You are asking yourself, my reason is urgent. So what kind of debt can work for me? And so you are now matching your reason with the kind of debt that can work for you. If you had an emergency, you are now looking for a short-term debt that can happen within a short span of time. Then number 5 is loan application. Now you have decided that this is the kind of lender that I'm looking for. So now let me go and apply. So now you're scouting around to pick the best lender, you're comparing terms, and you're now completing the application form to apply the loan until the loan is disbursed. Then step 6 is what I call purpose execution. There was a reason pushing you to borrow. Please remember that reason when the money hits your hands. And stick to that reason because you called it a good reason. Don't divert the funds, because if you do, you're creating a future man-made emergency. And lastly, the 7th step, purpose-driven borrowing, is loan repayment. You have been given the money, you have executed the purpose, then can you now fulfill your side of the bargain by repaying the debt that you have borrowed? I like saying that you should never borrow just because you qualify or because there is a willing lender. If you must borrow, do it because you need to. Do it because you need to. If you observe this and many other things, as I always say, you can do better. You can do better. You can do better. Thank you so much. And just before I sign off, it was mentioned that I have authored 7 books. Yes. They were read to us: Staying Financially Afloat, Relate Well, Live Well, Confronting Fear, You Can Do Better, Breaking Free from the Trap of Debt, Managing My Money. 7 titles, speaking about very interesting realities of life. The book's prices range between 500 and 1,000. We have 2 titles at 1,000, 3 titles at 700, and 2 titles at 500. But I would want you to pick this contact because you might need it at some point, just in case you would want to inquire more about the one-on-one coaching or about the books, then that is the contact that you will need to use. And so this is the contact, 0713 497172, 0713 497172. So for inquiries about the books, for inquiries about any other thing that I do, that is the number that will help you. I also invite you to follow me on social media. Just look for Coach Roy Okonji. Subscribe to my YouTube channel at Coach Roy Okonji. Like my Facebook page at Coach Roy Okonji. Follow me on TikTok at Coach Roy Okonji, and indeed on all social media platforms. And let's take this conversation to another level. Thank you so much, good people. I've really tried to run through this conversation given the time that we've had and given the left. But I want to believe I've spoken something that has hit the ears of the young to hear that thing. And like I said, these are pickup conversation. God willing, I don't know when that will be. I will be able to take some courses and continue what it is. Then we can be able to see when we can have a second group, which is the curative debt management. Thank you so much. Bless you abundantly. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Roy. We are not through with you yet. We have a few questions. If you have the time for us, you can answer a few of them. I personally have 3, and then I will open the floor for the other questions. I know this is a very huge topic, and it is so good to have someone mention the things that you're talking about, and especially the blunders that we make, especially when it comes to incurring debts or borrowing loans, etc. Now, I know you've spoken on a few things on how we can be able to know that we are on a bad debt. And I just wanted to ask you whether it is possible for you to align to us the signs that one has to look out for in order to know that they are in a bad debt. Like, for example, you mentioned about someone neglecting to pay, not because they won't be able to pay, just they can't. What are the other signs that I need to know in order to confirm to myself that where I'm headed is not good in terms of my debt management? Yeah, you
Right.
can answer that one first. Yes.
Okay. Your question is two-pronged. It is asking about the difference between good and bad debt. It's also asking about signs. There's some things I call signs of a trapped person. Another very interesting conversation, but we will share the signs for a trapped person for part B. That is where we start from by trying to uh, gauge where we are. Let me answer good and bad. Now, good debt is largely that debt that leaves you better than found. One to say it's a good thing that I did this.
Roy,
But
sorry.
if you look back and realize you almost
Roy,
yes, yes,
your
yes.
microphone is buzzing, I think. Your
You can be
microphone,
able
it's
to hear me now.
Yeah. But I think Regina needs to mute. You mute, and then we can yes. Once you mute, we'll hear Roy clearly. Okay, go
Right,
on.
that is done. Right, is it better now?
yeah, it's better now. You may proceed. We weren't hearing you.
Thank you, thank you. So I was saying good debt is debt that will leave you better off than it found you, especially in the long run. When you look back, you want to thank yourself that you took that debt. That means that good debt brings value to you, while bad debt takes value away from you. Financially speaking, good debt then brings money from you, all right? And bad debt takes money always away from you in terms of debt repayment. You're only repaying, but there's nothing financial that is coming to you. But when we talk about value, sometimes the value goes beyond immediate monetary returns, excuse me, goes beyond immediate monetary returns and begins to look at this thing leaving us much better. For example, someone who goes for an education loan may not immediately begin to have tangible money coming right away. But if they were clear in their mind why they needed to further their studies, after they use the debt to get the other paper they wanted to get, then they must also remember then to use the paper the way they intended, or the knowledge acquired thereof the way they intended, so that then that value can then translate to returns for that particular investment. Then that will be good debt. In other words, we have also said that good debt, other people help you to pay it, and bad debt, you have to struggle to pay it yourself. For example, if you borrowed money and you invested somewhere, and the returns are sorting out the debt and probably leaving you with something, then that becomes good debt. However, if you borrowed money and poured the money somewhere and no return is coming, and you have to struggle to pay yourself, all right, by looking for money to pay, then that becomes bad debt. But I always finish this way by reminding us, okay, that every debt has a burden element in it. Even the ones we are calling good and those that we are calling bad, every debt has a burden element in it. A borrower who has borrowed and invested very well, and the debt is probably repaying itself. At the back of their minds, they are always looking forward to the day they clear with this burden. They may clear and pick another one, that is fine. But that just shows you the burden element in every debt. What I am meaning by this is to remind us that we have to be cautious as we enter into debt so that we are handling a burden, but the burden is a bit soft on us because it's bringing value to us, as opposed to handling a burden that has already brought us trouble, okay? Because we were not keen on the purpose for which we were borrowing. So for now, allow me to just stop the demarcation there, but because I have alluded to the fact that I will try to find time in the near future for us to do part B, we usually open part B by looking at what I call signs of a trapped person to help you be able to gauge whether you are already trapped or you are nearing there. So there's an exercise I came up with, a very interesting exercise that God willing, I might take you through a bit of the exercise for you to be able to gauge yourself. I've also shared very many signs, I think 18 of them in my book, Breaking Free from the Trap of Debt. Probably for someone who might want to interact with that before we have our part 2, no problem. But that will be able to help us be able to understand whether we are already troubled or we are nearing getting into the trap. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you've answered that very, very well. Yes, those are basically the signs of a person that is getting trapped into debt. I don't know whether it emerges with my second question, and you can confirm that. But I wanted to know whether you have some strategies that are effective in debt management. Are there any strategies that you can give us upfront and say that these are the best effective strategies for managing debt? That is, if you're already in debt and you're feeling trapped.
Yeah. All right. Good question. Again, a question that will probably properly be handled in part 2. But let's say this. I usually approach debt management from a very interesting angle. I came up with an approach that I call the ADSA 4-stage approach. And that approach is what informs the second part. But let me just, in a nutshell, tell us what the acronym stands for, ADSA. The first A is acceptance, okay? And so my argument is that you cannot solve a problem whose existence you still deny. So that's the starting point. You must start by accepting, acknowledging you're in trouble, and accepting many other things that will prepare your mind for the journey of breaking free, all right? Then the second D is what I call disclosure, okay? Disclosure is where you are coming to terms with the depth of your mess. You are getting to acknowledge how deep your hole looks like. My argument here is that you cannot effectively climb out of a hole whose depth you have not acknowledged. So if you find yourself in a pit, before you do any other thing, you take a moment to look up and see how far away from you do you see some light. Probably you can then figure out, if I dug a few steps on the sides, I'll be able to get out. So this is the stage where I usually give people some homework. It's the stage where you do a list of all the people you owe. Okay, so you must start by knowing who you owe. Now, I realized the average human being is not comfortable doing a list of the people they owe. Okay, but then I also realized that once you do a list of the people you owe, there is some magic in it. It starts to speak to you. You start assuring yourself some things. You start telling yourself, it can't be this way. I can't allow this to continue this way, right? I have to do something about it. So there is some hidden power in that particular process. We will probably also get to say something about it. Then once you have seen your list, then you move to the strategic stage. So what do you do with your list? What are some of the things that you can do with your list? That is where your question is plugging in. But I usually don't start by rushing into the strategies before we prepare our mind, before we get to do our disclosure, and then now we can begin to ask ourselves, what are some of the ways that we can utilize for us to be able to break free. And then there will be a host of reasons. That is the point where we go different ways, because no two individuals have two similar financial circumstances. It was at that point that I created the debt clinic. But for purposes of group conversation, I usually do share a long list of some of the things you can try out without preempting much, including things like reaching out to your lenders, renegotiating with them, and just showing you the kind of things you can be telling them, things like consolidation, where you pick one big debt that is a bit cheaper and lenient on you, and you use it to kill a number of other debts that are a bit expensive and probably that are giving you a lot of pressure. Then the last A is action, okay? And then I have to encourage you that it's not enough for you to plan. You have to roll your sleeves and get into the mud and get taking the action for you to be able to break free, right? So in a nutshell, that is what the breaking free process entails. It's a process that I call the ADSA four-stage approach. God willing, should we find chance, then we'll be able to dig deeper into that particular process. But I just want to hope that this brief, has also just alluded to something, that we have to start by accepting that we are in trouble. For as long as you're still fighting to make a statement, to show people that you're still okay, you're still borrowing to announce that you're fine, borrowing to compete and compare, you're not ready and set for breaking free. You'll be making attempts. You will be like what many people do, promising themselves that when they clear this current debt, they will never go back to where they are. 6 months down the line, they're in a worse position than they were because they didn't go through some complete process. So allow me to leave it here at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your answers. It looks like this is a very in-depth conversation that the chairman should consider having you back 2 more times so that we can dive into this deeply. Now, I'm going to ask my fellow members of Kajiado County to give them the opportunity to ask questions. We're going to start with Benjamin. Benjamin, you're going to introduce yourself and let us know whether you have any question or any questions from the viewers from the social handles. And then after that, we'll be followed by the chairman. And then after that, will be followed by the vice chairman, that is Haris Kemunto, who will ask our questions, if any, and also give closing remarks and close the session with a word of prayer. Otherwise, from myself, I think I have been enlightened. Over to you, Benjamin.
Hi, everyone. On the social media handles, I don't see any questions. But if they come up, I will definitely let you know before we close the session.
Okay. Thank you, Coach Roy. I've been asked to ask a question. Let me ask. I think I have only one for now. What would you consider to be the optimum cost of borrowing currently? I know it can change, but what would you consider to be optimum? That is what somebody can pay comfortably or invest and get a comfortable return.
Wow, good question. Again, it takes me to something else I do, categorization of people. We have two kinds of people. We have what I call comfort-oriented people, and we have wealth creation-oriented people. For wealth creation-oriented people, they'll be looking at what makes sense for them in terms of what returns will this thing give me. I am comfortable to repay, right? But then I am looking at, before I get into it, I also want to understand roughly I'm looking for something that is going to give me returns that I am happy with, so that even as I repay, these returns are able to cover the repayment and leave me with something. Now, the guys who are comfort oriented are the guys who the first thing they want to consider is the ability to repay. They don't care whether they are borrowing to create wealth or not, but what comes to their mind first is, am I able to repay? Okay, and so for them, as long as they're able to repay comfortably, and then they'll be running their other needs without much trouble, then they're fine. So once you get to know yourself, like I like saying, in the world of money management, the starting point is for you to appreciate yourself, for you to be able to know yourself. For someone like me, I'll be very much looking at what is this thing going to, to bring me. So my optimization will be looking at better returns where I have placed the money, for the returns to be able to sort themselves out, all right, and also just leave me with something. So my thinking begins from the time of the side of the value that this thing is going to bring me. Before then, I also look at my ability to repay vis-a-vis what this thing stands to bring to me. So in a nutshell, those are the two kinds of people that you will meet. So for me, the second way works for me, but I also know very many people. In fact, after a while, I came to learn that there are some people you may not sway because you will not convince them that there's debt that can be good. There's debt that can bring money for them. If they must borrow, then let it be something they can repay, and they are able to run their lives without too much trouble. So allow me to leave that one there. I also just wanted to mention that I should be signing off in the next 5 minutes exact, because I need to hit the road again. I have not completed my journey, but I hope I have said something that is answering your question.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we will have many sessions. At least, I think we need to sit and agree how we progress. There are so many people who have come up and also asked about how to manage their debt. So we'll allow you to leave. I think the rest of the questions we'll ask them more during the next session. But I think that is very clear. The answer you've given me is quite clear. Let's now go back to the moderator for the way forward.
Thank you so much. Yes, there are very many questions, and I hope one day you'll be able to come online in our forum, especially the WhatsApp, and we can be able to ask those questions. I'm looking at debt recycling. I know that is something that is a bit deep, and we would like to know how to go about that. But right now, let me give Alice this opportunity. If you have one question, and then you close, so that Mr. Roy can be able to get home on time. Thank you. Alice, over to you, and you can close after this.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Roy, for that informative session that we've had. That kept me wondering when my chairman asked about what is the optimum loan one can go for, optimum borrowing. And I ask myself, the institutions that we have in Kenya, they always train members to build a relationship with them, that you borrow a little money and then you graduate until maybe you become a big borrower. The same aspect, I've seen it being picked up by the current Hustler Fund. I understand you are told to take 500 shillings, you repay, then you are graduated to at least a large amount. I may not really ask you a question to respond because of the interest of time. Let it be like something that we are going to think about in our next talk, maybe when you'll be talking now to the common person like us in the grassroots. Those small loans that affect us, the NJAA-NUARYs, the Hustler Fund, the Women Fund, and all those sort of funds that we have, and also the Chama funds from lending institutions. I think you will enlighten us more on that. So let me not ask a question of that. Let's appreciate you and thank you so much, even as we bow down for a word of prayer. Jehovah, Lord, we thank you. You've walked with us through. You've taught us on being purpose-driven borrowers. And I pray that whoever has listened and those that are going to listen to these teachings that Mr. Roy has accorded us, Lord, we pray, let it be a blessing, let it be our portion, let it help the people of Kajiado and even Kenya at large to grow into greater heights, my dear King of Glory, that even the Kenyan country can reduce its debt courtesy of the information and the teachings and the knowledge that we'll get from people like Roy. I want to thank you, dedicate the Kajiado We Want team to you, Lord, that you may continue guiding us with your wisdom, that whatever we do or decide, the topics that we bring on board, they will be beneficial to your people. And together, my dear King of Glory, we are going to change this country and this county together. I want to worship you and magnify your holy name, for it's in the name of Jesus Christ I do pray and even believe. Amen. May the Lord bless you.
Amen.
May the Lord keep you. And may the Lord sustain
Amen.
you. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roy, and have a blessed night and safe journey as you travel. We will definitely call you back.
Thank you so much. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to all of you as you go about your activities. Until we talk again. Thank you. Thank you.
Merry Christmas and a Happy New
Merry
Year.
Christmas to you too.
Happy holidays, everyone. Bye for now.